Imagine a world where everyone you know, love and cherish would all be taken away from you by the time you hit the age of just 30. Crazy, right? Welcome back to the channel. Here we gonna explore exactly what would happen if humans could only live up to 30 years old. So sit back and enjoy the ride, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more awesome videos. Let's begin. No retirement. You would never have to worry about retiring in this scenario because you would live long enough to get there. Humans are living longer than ever thanks to advancements in medicine and technology. In fact, it's expected that by the year 2050, there will be more people over the age of 60 than under the age of 18. But what if the trend were to reverse? What if the average lifespan were to drop to just 30 years old? Without the safety net of Social Security or pensions, people would have to start planning for their own retirements much earlier in life. Some might choose to invest their money in businesses or properties, while others might simply save up as much money as possible. With no guarantee of a long and healthy retirement, people would be forced to make tough decisions about how to use their limited time and money. Number 2, free market healthcare. If the average lifespan were to drop to just 30 years old, the free market would likely take over healthcare. This is because there would simply not be enough demand for healthcare services to support the current system. As people got closer to the age of 30, the demand for healthcare would skyrocket, causing prices to soar. Only those who could afford to pay for healthcare would be able to access it, leading to a two-tier system of care. Those who could afford healthcare would likely live longer and healthier lives, while those who couldn't would die sooner and suffer more illness and disability. This would create a large disparity in health outcomes between the rich and poor, which could lead to social unrest. 3, economic collapse. Our economy is largely based on the idea that people will live long and healthy lives. This is why we have retirement plans, mortgages, and other long-term financial obligations. But what if the average lifespan were to drop to just 30 years old? This would cause major disruptions to our economy. The first impact would be felt in the job market. With people dying at the age of 30, there would be a huge increase in demand for jobs. This is because people would want to make as much money as possible before they died. However, there wouldn't be enough jobs to go around, which would lead to mass unemployment. This unemployment would lead to a sharp decline in consumer spending, which would cause the economy to collapse. 4, population growth explosion. If the average lifespan were to drop to just 30 years old, the population would likely explode. This is because people would have more babies since they would know that their child would only live for 30 years. Additionally, with no retirement, people would feel pressured to have children in order to continue the family line. This pressure would be especially strong in families with a history of early death. The population explosion would put a strain on resources and lead to widespread poverty. There would simply not be enough food, water, or jobs to go around. 5, childhood mortality rates. Currently, 1 in 4 children die before the age of 5. But what if the average lifespan were to drop to just 30 years old? It is likely that even more children would die before reaching the age of 5. This is because the parents of these children would likely be uneducated and poor. They would not have the resources necessary to keep their children alive. Additionally, there would likely be a shortage of medical professionals available to treat sick children. As a result, even more children would die before reaching the age of 5. This would lead to a vicious cycle of poverty and death. The children who did survive would be more likely to die young themselves, and their children would face the same risks. 6, a new world order. If the average lifespan were to drop to just 30 years old, the world would be a very different place. The United States would no longer be the most powerful country in the world. China, which has a much younger population, would take over as the global superpower. The US would be too weak to defend itself against China and would likely be taken over. This would lead to a new world order with China at the top. Under this new world order, the US would be a second-class nation. Its military would be much smaller and its economy would be in sharp decline. Americans would have to work hard just to survive. 7. Family planning. If the average lifespan were to drop to just 30 years old, family planning would become a hot topic. People would need to decide how many children they could afford to have before they died. They would also need to decide when to have children so that they could be sure that their kids would live for at least a few years. This would be a difficult decision for many people. Some would choose to have as many children as possible, while others would choose to have no children at all. There would be a lot of societal pressure to have children, but ultimately, it would be up to each individual family to decide what was best for them. No. 8. Time constraints. If the average lifespan were to drop to just 30 years old, people would feel a sense of urgency to do everything they wanted to do. There would be a feeling that time was ticking and that every day was precious. This would likely lead to an increase in risky behavior such as speeding and drunk driving. People would also be more likely to engage in dangerous activities such as skydiving and bungee jumping. The fear of death would also lead to an increase in crime. People would be more likely to commit crimes in order to get what they wanted before they died. Overall, society would be much more chaotic if the average lifespan were to drop to just 30 years old. There would be a general sense of panic and people would be desperate to do everything they could before their time ran out. 9. Youthful perspective. If the average lifespan were to drop to just 30 years old, the world would be viewed very differently. Younger people would be seen as wiser and more capable than they are now. After all, they would have lived through more and experienced more in their short lives than anyone older than 30. This shift in perspective would likely lead to changes in how younger people are treated in society. They would be given more rights and responsibilities and would be seen as more capable of making decisions about their own lives. The world would be a very different place if the average lifespan were to drop to just 30 years old. The implications would be felt in every aspect of life, from the way we work to the way we think about the future. It would be a world filled with uncertainty and danger, but it would also be a world full of opportunity. The youth would have a chance to make their mark on the world and create a better future for themselves and future generations. Number 10. New technologies. If the average lifespan were to drop to just 30 years old, it would likely lead to some major changes in the types of technologies that are developed. For example, there would be a huge focus on developing new medical treatments and technologies that could extend lifespan. This is because there would be a huge incentive to do so. After all, if you could find a way to help people live longer than 30 years, you would be a multi-billionaire. There would also be a big focus on developing new technologies that could improve the quality of life for people who were terminally ill. These technologies would allow people to live out their final days as comfortably as possible. Overall, the types of technologies that are developed would be heavily influenced by the knowledge that no one could live beyond the age of 30. If you enjoyed this video, check out another video we did on what if everyone on Earth became immortal. We also have a ton of other videos on our channel that we know you'll love. Thanks for watching.